Sometimes the strongest sign that someone has changed is not what they say, but what they no longer react to. The same words that once unsettled them now pass through without resistance. The same situations that once demanded their attention are quietly observed, and then released. If you've noticed this shift in yourself, even in the smallest ways, stay here for a moment. There's something quietly unfolding beneath it that deserves to be understood. There's a phase in life, often unnoticed from the outside, where a person begins to detach, not from people, but from the need to be emotionally entangled in everything. It doesn't come from indifference. It comes from experience, from seeing how much energy is lost in trying to control what was never ours to control. One of the first subtle patterns is how you begin to respond to other people's moods. There was a time when someone else's irritation could shape your entire day. You would adjust, accommodate, try to smooth things over. Now you notice it, but you don't absorb it the same way. You've learned that not every emotion in the room belongs to you. Then there's the shift in how you handle disappointment. It used to linger. You would revisit conversations, replay decisions, question yourself. Now, while the feeling still arrives, it doesn't stay as long. You've come to understand that disappointment is often less about what happened, and more about what you expected to happen. You may also find that your tolerance for unnecessary explanations has quietly disappeared. You no longer feel the same need to justify your choices, especially to those who have already decided how they see you. There's a growing awareness that clarity is not always achieved through more words. Another change appears in the way you approach relationships. You begin to notice patterns more quickly, not in a critical way, but in a grounded, almost observational way. You see who reaches out only when they need something, who listens and who simply waits to speak. And instead of confronting it every time, you make quieter decisions about how much access each person has to your time and energy. There's also a shift in how you experience solitude. It no longer feels like something to avoid. In fact, it becomes a space where you can finally hear your own thoughts without interruption. What once felt like loneliness begins to feel like clarity. And somewhere along the way, your relationship with urgency changes. Not everything feels immediate anymore. You no longer rush to respond, to decide, to fix. There's a pause that didn't exist before. A moment where you allow things to settle before you engage. Around this point, something else often surfaces. Memories. Not dramatic ones, but quiet, ordinary moments from years ago. A conversation where you tried too hard. A situation where you stayed longer than you should have. A time when you ignored your own instincts just to keep the peace. If one of those memories just came to you now, and it carries a faint sense of recognition, not regret, but understanding, well, then you're already seeing something important. That version of you was doing the best they could with what they knew at the time. And if this reflection is giving shape to something you felt, but never quite named, consider allowing yourself to stay connected to these quiet realizations. Sometimes understanding your own patterns is the beginning of changing them. Without force, without pressure. What's happening beneath all these subtle shifts is not emotional distance, it's emotional precision. Psychologically, this reflects a movement away from unconscious reactivity toward conscious selection. Earlier in life, many of our responses are automatic. We react because something touches an old pattern: approval, fear, belonging, validation. But over time, especially after repeated experiences, the mind begins to recognize those patterns. And instead of reacting immediately, it starts to ask a quieter question. Is this mine to carry? That single question creates space. And in that space, something powerful happens. You begin to choose. You choose which conversations to engage in, which emotions to process, and which to let pass, which relationships to invest in, and which to gently step back from. This doesn't make life smaller. It makes it clearer. There is also a growing acceptance of limits, both yours and others. You begin to understand that not everyone will meet you where you are. Not everyone will understand your perspective. And more importantly, not everyone needs to. This realization often brings a kind of emotional stability that wasn't possible before. Not because life becomes easier, but because you are no longer resisting it in the same way. You may notice that your reactions become quieter. Not suppressed, just measured. You don't feel the same pull to correct every misunderstanding or respond to every slight. There is a quiet confidence in knowing that your peace is more valuable than being right. And perhaps one of the most significant changes is this: you begin to trust yourself. Not in a loud declarative way, but in small, consistent decisions. You trust when something feels off. You trust when something feels right. You trust your need for rest, your need for space, your need for distance. This trust replaces something that used to take up a lot of space: self-doubt. And as that doubt fades, so does the need for constant reassurance. What remains is a quieter, steadier way of moving through the world, one that doesn't demand attention, but carries a certain weight, a presence that is felt, even when nothing is said. If you've recognized yourself somewhere in these patterns, then you're not losing anything, not connection, not emotion, not depth. You're refining how you engage with them. And that refinement is not something that happens quickly. It's shaped over years, through moments that didn't go as planned, through relationships that taught you more than they gave you, through experiences that quietly changed your perspective. And channel name. Thanks you for listening and being part of this reflection. So if things feel different lately, quieter, slower, more intentional, that's not something to question. It's something to understand. Because sometimes growth doesn't look like becoming more. Sometimes it looks like needing less and finally being at peace with that.